Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we are actually with attorney Mark Albright, who's taking a little bit of time of his day to explain a very great question in regards to home ownership and how to take title. So, Mark, when we sit down with a client and we have we're preparing a deed, we ask how they want to take ownership of the property. Can you explain to us a little bit of the different ways of how someone could take ownership?
Well, George, that's actually a very interesting question because I think sometimes people tend to gloss over that. They're so anxious to get that deed in their hands. As long as their names are spelled right, I think a lot of folks really don't understand the nuance of how exactly you're taking title to a particular piece of property. One of the key differences in ways you can take title is the difference between taking title as tenants in common and as joint tenants with right of survivorship.
Okay.
If two people take title as tenants in common, what it means is they each own an undivided 1/2 interest in the property. However, each of them is totally free to sell their 1/2 interest in the property. So if you and I buy a piece of property together as tenants in common, I decide I'd rather have the money than the property, I can liquidate my 1/2, and now you may be a tenant in common with somebody you don't actually prefer to own property with.
Wow. Well, what about husband and wife?
Well, a husband and wife is a bit like joint tenants with right of survivorship in some respects. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship differs from tenancy in common in that if the two of us own property together and I pass away, you would then own the property, free and well, not free and clear necessarily, but in your own name. So joint tenancy with right of survivorship adds the additional benefit that the last one standing gets the whole property. The difference between joint tenants with right of survivorship and tenancy by the entireties, or tenancy as husband and wife, is that you have an additional element of that's not present in joint tenancy with right of survivorship, and that is it can't be unilaterally severed, as lawyers would say.
What does that mean?
What that means is that if you and I are spouses and we own a property together, I now cannot sell that property or any proportional interest in the property without you joining in the conveyance.
Okay.
And that's not true with joint tenancy with right of survivorship.
Oh.
So even if we owned a property as joint tenants with right of survivorship, if I decide I want to sell it, I can still sell my half interest in the property, just as I could with a tenancy in common. The only difference with joint tenancy with right of survivorship is if we happen to both still own it together at the time I die, then you get the property.
So what about two people who are young, engaged, and buying a house prior to a marriage?
Well, it's not possible to take title as tenants by the entireties unless you're married at the time.
Good.
So if the timing is such that folks are not yet married but are doing a closing on real estate,
right,
the best they can do is to have a joint tenancy with right of survivorship. But I would think in that situation, what I would strongly recommend is that after their marriage, they redeed the property to themselves as tenants by the entireties. Tenancy by the entireties is another way to refer to taking title as husband and wife.
Okay.
A lot of times when you see that, people don't really understand what entireties means.
Right.
But again, to go over the key difference among the three methods, with tenancy in common, you each own a proportionate share, an interest in the whole property. But either of you, or if there are three of you, any one of you can sell out your interest, and the remaining tenants in the property have to pretty much lump it. They would either need to buy you out or have to deal with the fact that they're now going to be tenants in common, with someone they don't know or may not want to be tenants with. A joint tenancy with right of survivorship Oh, and by the way, in a tenancy in common, on the death of any one of the tenants in common, their interest in property will pass to their heirs, either their beneficiaries under will or their intestate heirs if they die without a will. It will not, their interest will not succeed to the other tenants in common.
Oh, wow.
All right, so that's an
information.
important thing to know. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship, on the other hand, when one of the tenants passes away, then the other tenant or tenants will succeed to their interest in the property.
Very useful information.
And with tenancy by the entireties, the husband and wife mode, all of the benefits of joint tenancy with right of survivorship attach, but with the additional caveat that neither spouse can sell their interest in the property without the other spouse's joinder. So that's what makes tenancy by the entireties really unique, is that neither of the spousal tenants can break up the estate without the consent of the other, nor is it available for execution by the creditors of either individual spouse. That's a really important benefit of holding property as tenants by the entireties.
Mark,
Sure.
that's a lot of great information. I really appreciate that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
The only other thing I'd like to add is that it's always important to make sure you have title insurance. I've had people say to me already, is that really necessary? And in my experience and some of the title issues I've dealt with in the past, I would say it's definitely necessary, and regardless of how you're taking title.
Thank you for allowing us to be here with you
Thank you.
today. Thank you.
It's good to be part of it.